Anyone who's a fan of Deftones, or at the very least familiar with the band's music, knows just how hard it is to categorize them into one single genre, which makes the band nothing short of one of a kind while also inspiring countless bands throughout their career. Many fans would place Deftones within the annals of the nu metal scene that reached fever pitch in the late 90s until the early 2000s, with bands like Korn, Coal Chamber, Papa Roach, Limp Bizkit and P.O.D. leading the charge. But compared to their peers, the band is in a different realm regarding its sonic approach, with a tendency for experimentation that saw them fuse wildly different styles. Deftones' brand of metal, if it could be called that, made a lasting impression that made them stand out from the rest of their colleagues. How did the unique musical style of Deftones leave a lasting impact on this scene and solidify their legacy in the world of rock? Keep watching as we explore the rise of Deftones as an influential force in alternative music and the various challenges they had to overcome throughout their illustrious career. Nowadays, the term unique is so easily thrown around to describe a variety of bands. But one of the groups that truly deserve the description is Deftones. However, it took them years before they honed their signature style that got them called the Radiohead of metal. Frontman Chino Moreno, guitarist Stephen Carpenter, and drummer Abe Cunningham have known each other since childhood. They all attended the same high school in Sacramento, California, and forged a band through the city's skateboarding scene. Eventually, Chino learned that Stephen Carpenter played guitar and invited him for a jam session with Abe behind the drums. The story goes that Stephen was hit by a car when he was 15 years old, which confined him to a wheelchair for some time. Not able to do anything else, he taught himself to play guitar and became a fan of thrash metal bands such as Metallica and Anthrax. Soon, the trio invited Dominic Garcia to play bass. Abe left to join another group, and Garcia switched to drums while Chi Chang came in as the band's new bassist. This early lineup then recorded a 4-track demo. In 1993, Abe returned to the band as its drummer, completing Deftones' definitive lineup. The idea for the band's name came from Stephen, who combined the hip-hop slang def with the word tones, a popular suffix used by bands in the 50s like the Deltones. Deftones began playing local shows and later got opportunities to play around the greater California area, such as San Francisco and Los Angeles. After a performance in LA, the band got the attention of a representative from Maverick Records. Deftones played 3 songs for Freddie DeMann, who managed the likes of Michael Jackson and Madonna, and Guy Oseary, whose clients included Alanis Morissette and The Prodigy. The 2 executives were impressed and signed Deftones to Maverick. Now under a label, the band went to work on their debut album with producer Terry Date, most known at the time for producing Pantera's albums in the 90s. The result was 1995's Adrenaline, which finds the band at their rawest phase. Perhaps one can say this was their most nu metal album. Although this early on, it's apparent that the band is taking cues from a variety of other influences, such as post-punk and post-hardcore. Deftones went on a North American tour to promote the album, playing shows alongside bands like White Zombie, Korn, and Handsome. They even opened for Kiss during their Alive worldwide tour. Initially, Adrenaline was unsuccessful, but the band's continuous tour led to extensive promotion through word of mouth and the internet, which helped boost the album's sales. Eventually, Adrenaline sold over 220,000 units, and the band built a solid following. Anticipation for Adrenaline's follow-up was high, and the band decided to up the ante on their next record. In 1997, they released their second album, Around the Fur, which featured a more polished and tighter sound than its predecessor. The album was bolstered by singles My Own Summer and Be Quiet and Drive, both of which received extensive airplay on radio and MTV. The album reached number 29 on the Billboard 200 and stayed there for 17 consecutive weeks. Deftones embarked on another tour to support the album, where they played festivals such as Pink Pop, Warped Tour, and Ozfest. With the release of Around the Fur, Deftones have proven themselves capable of operating within the confines of alternative metal that was hot at the time. But the band has always hinted that they can be more than just another nu metal band, and for their next album, they decided to make that statement clearer than ever. After wrapping up their supporting tour for Around the Fur, Deftones collaborated again with Terry Date and spent 4 months in the studio to write and record their next album. In June 2000, they unveiled their fourth album, the critically acclaimed White Pony. The record still had the aggressive traits of alternative metal, but also drew from other genres such as shoegaze, trip-hop, and progressive rock, making it a much more experimental album. Additionally, this was the first album where turntablist Frank Delgado was featured as an official member of the band, and the first album where Chino started contributing guitar parts. White Pony became Deftones' best-selling album, and their first one to go platinum. Both fans and critics saw the album as the point where Deftones showcased the full extent of their powers and broke out from the trappings of standard metal. One of their songs from the album, Elite, also gave the band its first Grammy Award in 2001. The band continued experimenting with their sound on their self-titled fifth album released in 2003. Deftones featured a more diverse range of influences, with songs that go from aggressive to moody and can be both heavy and atmospheric at the same time. However, it didn't achieve the commercial success their label Maverick had hoped for, unlike White Pony. Eager to recover, the label told the band in early 2004 they needed to record a new album. What resulted from these sessions was 2006's Saturday Night Wrist. And yes, it took them that long to write, record, and release the album because this period saw the band deal with internal tensions. Additionally, this was their first album without Terry Date as producer. Initially, the band hired Bob Ezrin to produce the album, but during recording sessions in late 2004, things became heated between him and Chino. The latter was also dealing with substance abuse issues and a divorce at the time, which hampered his productivity. Despite not being done with recording, the band went on a hiatus in 2005. During this time, Chino expressed uncertainty about his future in the band. Deftones revisited the project in 2006 and got Sean Lopez as their producer. Chino re-recorded his vocals, and work on the album proceeded a bit more smoothly than before. The album was finally released in October of that year, and the band spent the rest of 2006 and 2007 touring extensively to promote it. The band has since said that the recording process was not a pleasant experience, and the final product sounded like an album lacking direction. Before Deftones embarked on the supporting tour for Saturday Night Wrist, the band and its management had a meeting to discuss its future, given how strained relationships between the members were at the time. The million-dollar question was thrown: is Deftones still willing to continue as a band? The answer was a unanimous yes, significantly restoring the band's morale. After touring from 2006 to 2007, the band quickly prepared new material for another album. In January 2008, Deftones announced that the tentative title for the project was Eros. The band regrouped with Terry Date and entered the studio in April of that year to start recording. However, production on the album ceased on November 4, 2008, when bassist Chi Chang was involved in a car accident. It was so severe that Chi was rushed to the ICU and fell into a coma. Work on Eros immediately stopped as Chi's health became top priority. Over the coming months, members of the music community would come together to support and raise funds for Chi's recovery. The website oneloveforchi.com was put up to crowdfund Chi's hospital bills. Also, members of Korn, Slipknot, Sevendust, and other alternative metal bands released a track titled A Song for Chi. The proceeds from the song went to Chi and his family. In January 2009, Deftones got bassist Sergio Vega to fill in for Chi on upcoming shows. Many of these concerts became fundraising events for Chi. As for Eros, the band decided to shelve it indefinitely, explaining that the album did not represent Deftones' identity at the time. Eros was described as a dark album, and in light of Chi's accident, the band wanted to put out something more optimistic. With work on Eros suspended, Deftones worked on an entirely new album with Vega on board. The resulting album was Diamond Eyes, which was released in 2010 and cracked the top 10 of the Billboard 200. Their next album was the highly praised Koi no Yokan, released in November 2012. The band remained productive despite Chi's absence, but soon they would face their biggest loss. On April 13, 2013, Chi passed away due to cardiac arrest. This came almost 5 years after the car accident that placed him in a coma. In the years since, Chi had slowly displayed minor signs of recovery, but also experienced more health complications such as pneumonia. The announcement of his passing came from his mother, Jean Chang. Following his death, Chino announced that Eros might see the light of day soon, but 9 years have passed and Eros has yet to be released. On the first anniversary of Chi's death, Deftones released a track from Eros titled Smile on YouTube. To date, the song remains the only material released from the album. 3 years after Chi's death, Deftones released their long-awaited 8th album, Gore. It debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200, their highest charting record since their self-titled album. It took them another 4 years before releasing another record, 2020's Ohms, which is seen by fans and critics as an excellent blend of everything that made Deftones, well, Deftones. The album peaked at number 5 on the Billboard 200, proving that Deftones remain a relevant musical outfit after all these years. The thought of flirting with genres like shoegaze, art rock, and post-punk was unheard of in metal before Deftones, but when the band came in, they didn't care. Today, Deftones' influence is present in many modern metal bands such as Architects, Spiritbox, and Death Heaven, bands who fused pounding riffs with atmospheric layers and moody vocals. Deftones have even impacted artists outside rock, such as R&B star The Weeknd, who acknowledged their influence on him. Overall, Deftones stretched the limits of what metal can be, inspiring more artists to think outside the box and cementing themselves as perhaps the most unique band in the genre.